Welcome back to Cape Cod Like a Local. You know, I have a lot of clients that have come to me and they're buyers from all around the country. And what's interesting is some have never heard of a basement.
Yeah.
And today I thought it might be great information to share with them, the different types of basements that there are and maybe the reasons for some of them.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I know a lot of folks in California, Florida, very rarely have basements in their homes, and so they don't understand the purpose, and or they've never had to deal with it. So it's kind of interesting the questions we get about it.
Fantastic for storage, that's for sure.
Right.
And if no one's ever had it, oh my gosh, that's great.
Well, I guess the first one we have, that we could talk about is a full basement. That's basically the whole footprint of the house, other than a garage maybe or a breezeway, but the entire footprint of the house has generally 8-foot tall walls, roughly, concrete walls. And so you've got as much space in the basement as you do in the body of the house.
Okay.
Generally good ceiling height. So sometimes people use that for storage, or they could actually finish it off to create more living space. Always permitted, always.
Yes. Yeah, I wanted to talk about the different accesses as well. I've seen some homes that have the inside access and you go down the stairs to the basement, and then you either have a bulkhead to exit or you have a walkout. Occasionally I have seen in some developments, I don't know if this is to save money, I'm not quite sure, but I didn't see an access going out. Of the basement. Is that generally a rule of thumb? Is it just a way a house is designed?
Yeah. Most full basements have access from the interior of the house, meaning you have a cellar door that you open and you get right downstairs into the basement. Makes it easy for access to continue the living space. The other thing we see on Cape Cod quite often is a garage access where there's an attached garage, and sometimes in the back of that there's an access that goes down.
Okay.
So those are the kind of generally the two types of interior access we see. More often than not, when you have interior access, you will also have some sort of an egress from the basement to the outside. Meaning, if it's below grade, you'll have a bulkhead, or they frame a little shed with a door at the top and a stairway going out. So you would generally have that, or walkout, meaning maybe there's a sloping yard in the front, might just be one level, and in the back, your foundation is exposed, or the back of the house is leveled with the ground. So that makes for a lot of really nice walkouts, make for great living space.
Oh my goodness. And letting the light in too.
Yes.
It's just an amazing space. It turns it into something really great.
Yeah. So that's kind of your interior access, garage access from the inside, bulkhead and walkout generally from the outside.
Okay.
Next up, we have the namesake of our home. It's Cape Cod Basement.
What's the difference, Dan, between a partial basement and a Cape Cod basement?
Very, very little difference.
Okay.
A lot of times a partial basement will still have interior access, and you'll go down and maybe the house was added on to over the years.
Okay.
Or maybe there was some reason they didn't extend the basement. Cost savings. Some, I've seen in basements where they had to go around big rocks. They just couldn't take the rock out, so they said to hell with it. They put a wall, and the rest of that was crawl space. So that just really means that some section of the home has a full basement, and then the rest of it does not.
Okay.
Now, as opposed to a Cape Cod basement, partials generally will still have interior access.
Okay.
And sometimes have an exterior access as well. The third type is the Cape Cod basement, and that's also partial, but that was generally made, they dug out one area of the basement to make it taller so they could put in things like a heating system, electrical panel, hot water system. So a lot of times that's more often than not exterior access. There might be a little doorway or a bulkhead going down there. It usually doesn't have, an 8-foot ceiling height. It might be 5 or 6 feet. You can get in there. You've got your systems there, and there's really not much room for anything else. Beyond that, it's all more often than not crawl space, just a little.
Okay, and that's what I see more often is that crawl space, pretty much a 3/4 basement per se, and then the crawl space that, and is that used for any other function? It's really, I see it with sand, I see it with a layer of plastic on there, and that's pretty much it?
Yeah, the crawl space?
Yeah.
That's generally, if they put some sort of a foundation around the outside, they just bring it up enough to lift the ground, the framing and the main house off of the ground.
Okay.
And then the crawl spaces, it can be used for access.
Got it.
If
For
they
the
need
pipes
to run-
underneath and so
Need
forth.
to run plumbing or electrical
Okay.
access. Not much use for anything other than that.
Okay.
And then a lot of times they will pour concrete slab to keep, mold and mildew and dust and dirt down
Okay.
and moisture, or they sometimes will just cover it with plastic for the same effect, just to keep moisture from mitigating up.
And that brings another point. How about a slab basement?
Yeah, slabs are not very common on the Cape.
Not a basement, just a slab, rather.
And a slab is usually when there's some sort of a footing poured around the outside, and then they just do a big concrete pad. Not really that common on Cape Cod.
Okay.
Where I grew up in the Raynham, Taunton-Raynham area, Raynham and Brockton, they had a builder back in the day, I don't know, 50s, 60s, was called Campanelli. And they used to call them Campanelli homes, and he would build a slab, build a home on top of that, and usually when you see that, you see like a closet with your hot water heater in it. And back then it was mostly all electrical heat, so they didn't need a lot of plumbing chases and that. So that's very basic. That was usually just a cost saving measure. Where sometimes some of them could be like crawl spaces, could be a cost saving, or it could be a high water table. So they didn't want to go with full basement. They just picked it up.
Oh, that's true.
And just went with a crawl space. So there's a lot of reasons they do it, but those are, basically the different types, all the way from the slab, which is just a flat piece of concrete, to a full basement where you could actually add extra living space and really useful space.
So some of the terms we just talked about, you're going to find them either on the MLS listing or in whatever search process that you use to look for homes. So in the basement section, it may say partial, it'll say finished, it'll say a crawl space. So just so that you know more information now, we thought this might be helpful to bring to you today.
Yeah, especially if you come from an area that doesn't have basements. And if any one of these types is a deal breaker for you, like if you say, I really like the idea of having a full basement and that's something I'm looking for, then it is important to take a look at, it'll list it there, what type of basement it is, to save you time and energy, because if you decide you really want a full basement or you don't, and now when you're going out looking at homes, you're not looking at homes with the wrong type of basement that doesn't fit your needs.
Right.
So it is good to really look at it.
Very good.
So this is just another one we get. Sometimes we just get so many questions from people from other areas that bring up things we take for granted. We don't even think to really explain them all that much.
Exactly.
But it's interesting working with so many people from all over the country.
Oh, it's wonderful.
Yeah. Well, we'll see you next week.
See you next week on Cape Cod Like a Local. Bye.
Bye-bye.